John Garrett, Dean of Highlands College of Montana Tech, and welcome to the beautiful Copper King Mansion, a jewel among the historic buildings in Uptown Butte. And you know, if you squint your eyes a little bit and listen very carefully, you can hear the voices of the past. You can see the people living their lives, arguing the issues of the day. But let me tell you why we're here today. Highlands College is offering a course entitled 20th Century Montana, People, Policies, and Perspectives. It's being taught by Evan Barrett, a new instructor at Highlands College. He comes to us after decades of high level of involvement in government, politics, economic development. He has brought together more than 20 major historical players in the recent history of Montana to provide historical insight to the class of that period of time. You know, today is the final class. And in this final class, you won't have to squint your eyes and you won't have to listen carefully, because history will be brought to life before your very eyes. You know, a course has some responsibilities, and a university has some responsibilities. The first responsibility is to the student, to bring expertise into the classroom which will benefit them in their studies. The second responsibility is to the discipline, to advance the discipline in some way. And the third responsibility of a course is to the community, to bring the university and the community together for the advancement of both. And I think this course accomplishes all three with high marks. This film documents a historical period in our history, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as we have enjoyed putting it together for you. Now I'd like to introduce Evan Barrett, the instructor of the class.
Well, welcome to the students who are here. This is your last class. By being here, you don't have to come on Tuesday. Those, by the way, who aren't here, I'm sending them a notice to come on Tuesday. Thank you for participating in this class. We had a segment of students taking it for credit, and I will tell you now, you all passed.
All right.
The grades are not out until the 27th of December, no matter how hard we try. Secondly, we had a very large, 80% of the class were folks from the community who were expressing their interest in the history of Butte, the history of Montana, by showing up and signing up for this class, and I think it lived up to the expectations, mostly because we were able to offer for the early years, the years say before 1960, the traditional books and documents and films and occasional Ross Tool lectures on film to really get the flavor of the early days. But once you got past 1960, we had the opportunity to actually bring history makers to talk about how the history that they helped make. And that is, I think, a method we have to be thinking about all the time. Instead of being afraid of the years as we get closer to them, 70s, oh, that's 40 years away. That's not quite history in some people's books, but it really is. And 1980, 1990, there are people available to come in and help augment the education effort at our universities. And we're going to try to look at doing something along this vein next fall, although we probably will do it differently, having learned. But this was a great class to work on, to work with, and that list of people that are in the program, all history makers. Luckily, and I'm appreciative to every one of them who, everyone is a friend and someone I've worked with over the years, to be able to have them respond to the effort to bring them to Butte, to broaden the opportunity of education here in Butte and at Montana Tech and Highlands College. So to all of those who are on the list, and especially those who came today, thank you. Now, we were able, looking backwards beyond 1960 to find a couple of history makers who were willing to come back and tell us a little bit about the history they were engaged in at the time. And as you know, Montana elected the first woman to Congress, Jeannette Rankin. And she had a very, very interesting career. Most of you know it, but that being said, I'm not going to spoil it by going over it, except to say that she was able to serve 2 terms in Congress at particularly strategic moments. And she will address those and tell us a little bit about her life as a suffragette, as a person interested in progressive policies across the board, and as a person interested in the issues of war and peace. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the first woman elected to the United States Congress from the great state of Montana, Jeannette Rankin.
Thank you for inviting me here to speak with you today. While my family's house was one of the first in Missoula to have indoor plumbing and central heating back in 1880, I am not comfortable in this particular mansion. For this house was built on the backs of the workers who struggled for their families in the horribly unhealthy and unsafe working conditions of the Butte mines. Although I am concerned about women in peace, I am also concerned about all who are oppressed by corporate greed. Back in 1909, I went to New York City to attend the New York School of Philanthropy, where I discovered great social inequities and spoke out about them. I said, babies are dying from cold and hunger. Soldiers have died for lack of a woolen shirt. Might it not be that the men who have spent their lives thinking in terms of commercial profit find it hard to adjust themselves to thinking in terms of human needs? Things were wrong, and they needed to be fixed. That also applied at the U.S. Bureau of Engraving, where as a member of Congress, I found many girls work 14, 15, 16 hours. Workers not reporting for work on Sundays were demoted and put on night shifts. Girls helping printers on power presses, making banknotes and Liberty bonds, lift their arms 6,000 times a day. And when I came to Butte to help mediate the bitter strike and impasse between the industrial workers of the world and the Amalgamated Copper Company, I discovered firsthand what it meant to stand up against massive corporate power and wealth. At that time I said, I think I know perfectly well what the Amalgamated will try to do to me. They will try to do to me just what they have done to everyone who ever tried to oppose them in and out of Montana. They own the state, they own the government, they own the press. First, I will be roasted from one end of the state to the other. Every newspaper will print my shortcomings, real and fancy, in the largest type in the composing room. All the mud and all the bricks in the state will come in my direction. Now their methods are becoming gradually more refined. Now they use political ruin, social ostracism, financial ruin. In fact, all the things which usually go to make life worthwhile to the average person. Years ago, they used to put people out of the way that tried to organize the miners. Now, if you read the daily press, they simply deport them. The result is the same. They'll do everything to discredit me, both in Washington and in my own state. Yes, I know what it is to oppose wealth and power, and that is why I am uncomfortable speaking in this particular house. But let me also speak to you of women in peace, where things are also wrong and need to be fixed. It is difficult to understand that the men of this country who have brought us so many wars have also felt compelled not only to deny women the right to participate in making policy decisions for America, they have even tried to deny women the basic right to vote for those who do make the decisions. Is it no wonder that we have lost our way as a nation? Only with the vote can women actually change things in this country. That is why I volunteered in Washington State's campaign for women's suffrage. To win that battle, we had to lead with our heads as well as our hearts. I studied economics, sociology, and public speaking, although today it's not working so well, at the University of Washington. Women must be smarter as we advance the battle for women's rights. And we must know how to organize ourselves and our male supporters. Men and women are like two hands. It is foolish not to use both. I spent 3 years as a sidewalk campaigner, lobbyist, and field organizer for the New York Women's Suffrage Party. I worked as well for women's rights in North and South Dakota, Missouri, Nebraska, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. But nothing was more important than the battle for women's rights right here in Montana. In Montana's territorial days, women were allowed a limited right to vote in school elections and on tax levies if we owned property. But we lost even that limited right in 1889 when the new constitution of the new state of Montana said being male was a requirement for voting. So we pushed back for many years for this progressive change, and by 1912, the platforms of both major parties supported a woman's right to vote. In 1913, the Montana legislature sent to the voters of Montana a removal of the word male in our Constitution. In 1914, during the campaign, I said, all over the country, women are asking for the vote. We are a force in life, a factor which must be considered in all problems. While we Montana women have broader opportunities than the women of any other part of the world, we want the ballot in order to give the opportunity to less fortunate women. Women's futures depend greatly on women's voices being heard. And women's voices being heard require women have the right to vote. The decision about women's right to vote was left to the males of Montana in 1914 because they were the only legal voters at the time. We had to organize. We went busily to work in this state getting our preliminary organization in shape. This meant precinct organizations and the training of a corps of efficient workers. We wanted a capable, efficient woman in every precinct in the state. These precinct captains formed in each county the county committee. And the county committees in turn elected their chairman, who formed the state committee and elected the state organization. We had to organize, and we did. We fought hard, and in the end, we won. Montana became the 11th state to allow women the right to vote, but here's the sad story. While a little over 41,000 men voted for women's right to vote, nearly 38,000 voted no. So I think we know it is a long, hard battle ahead of us for women's rights. Those women, now able to vote in 1916, helped me get almost 77,000 votes for Congress. I became the first woman to go to Congress to set policy for this great nation. I entered Congress eager to rectify many of the ills of society, applying a woman's knowledge, feelings, and sensitivities to the effort. And I ran right away into the biggest question: war or peace? On April 17th, I remember it still, President Woodrow Wilson called us into special session and asked us to vote for war against Germany. I was confronted with a crisis. I was against war. I knew that you can no more win a war than you can win an earthquake for the same reasons. I believe there's no compromise with war. It cannot be reformed, it cannot be controlled, it cannot be disciplined into decency or codified into common sense. Women like me could not be called into battle. And if I, as a woman, can't go to war, I have to refuse to send someone else. It would not be right. I know war is the slaughter of human beings temporarily regarded as enemies on as large a scale as possible. But my friends and allies, my political allies, felt that if I voted against war, it might damage the effort to gain rights for women on a broader scale. The hardest part was the fact that the suffragettes were divided. And many of my beloved friends said that I would ruin the suffrage movement if I voted against war. That pressure might have pushed me in if I hadn't realized the first woman has to take the first stand. So, when my first vote in Congress came, it was the first vote ever by a woman in Congress. When I was asked to say aye or nay, I stood up in the chamber, held onto the seat in front of me, and proclaimed as firmly as I could, I want to stand by my country, but I cannot vote for war. 56 others joined me in that vote, but for all intents and purposes, my vote was the one heard round the world. During that term, the Montana legislature reapportioned our 2 congressional districts, 2 congressional seats, into separate districts throughout the states. And I knew I could not run in the district they had given me in 1918. So I decided to run statewide for the U.S. Senate against Senator Walsh. I lost in the Republican primary. Then I ran in the general election against Walsh and the Republican. I was the National Party candidate, but I lost again. It appeared that I was politically finished. So I then became the Women's Peace Party delegate for the Women's International Conference for Permanent Peace in Zurich, Switzerland. When I came back, I served on the executive board and as a lobbyist for the U.S. branch of the Women's International League. I knew Congress. I argued women have a unique role in attaining peace and that war can be outlawed. I said, disarmament will not be won without women's aid. Half of the human race does not fight and has never fought. Why should men not learn something from the non-fighting female? For many years I stayed active in progressive political causes, including those of war and peace. I advocated high taxes on war profits and a constitutional amendment to outlaw war. Eventually, for a while, I was lobbyist for the National Council for the Prevention of War. Eventually, I got tired of fighting the bureaucracy of all those organizations, and as we looked down the barrel of war again in 1939, I returned to Montana. I love this state. I wanted to start a peace society in Montana, but then I really wanted to return to Congress to stop the war from happening. I ran for Congress again in 1940, and for some reason, perhaps my notoriety, perhaps people's concerns about possible war, I was elected to Congress again. War was in the air in Washington, D.C. in 1941. And at the end of the year, December 8th to be precise, I again faced the issue, myself and my conscience. The president asked us to declare war against Japan. I knew it was coming. Roosevelt was deliberately trying to get us into the war. I didn't let anybody approach me. I got in my car and I disappeared. I just drove around. I was so angry. Nobody could reach me. I got madder and madder because everywhere I went there were soldiers. I don't remember if I thumbed my nose at them or not, but I wanted to. I went to Congress and I voted no on the war again. This time, I stood alone. I could not run for Congress again, but I am still against war. I continue to believe that if there were more women setting policy in the Congress, and dare I say it, even as president, someday, we may be able to end war. After all, we're half the people. We should be half the Congress. That is the ultimate message that I leave you with today. Elect more women. And do it, not just on ideas, but with organization and work. Tell young women that they must get to people who don't come to meetings. It never did any good for all the suffragettes to come together and talk to each other. There will be no revolution unless we go out into the precincts. You have to be stubborn, and ornery for the future of our country. Go out and do the work. Thank you.
A marvelous message that also reinforces one of the things we talked about in class, which is what political parties stand for by label changes over the years. Jeannette Rankin was a Republican, just like Joe Dixon was a progressive Republican when he was elected governor. So you can't always tell by the label what people are going to stand for, most times. Now, sliding a little bit further back in time to the second decade of the 20th century, Butte was booming. Butte was booming. The mines, as Floyd told us, right? 15,000 underground miners in Butte. Fueling the Industrial Revolution, fueling our preparations for World War I and our participation in World War I. And at that time, the differences between, especially on safety, especially after the Granite Mountain fire, led to a strong, bitter strike with the copper company and the workers. But the company was very skilled at trying to divide the unions to get their way. So from outside of Butte came a dynamic labor organizer named Frank Little, who was with the industrial workers of the world, sometimes called the Wobblies, a politically strong, radical, pro-labor, pro-worker organization. And Frank came here to steal the backbone of the Butte workers. And we're going to hear today from that wonderful labor organizer, Frank Little. Frank.
Like Miss Rankin, I feel pretty uncomfortable in this palatial house, if I can use that word for this incredible place. I'm much more comfortable with people who can afford to live in places like this and to have all the opulence that you see here, the copper kings and the copper bosses. That's what I'm here to fight against. You know that corporations are not people. You know that the people are the ones who make the corporations. And you know that the Butte people and the Butte miners are the ones who made the copper companies happen. I have here the hated wrestling card. This is what the company would give you in order to be allowed to apply for a job. This doesn't give you a job. This lets you ask for a job. Where's Amanda Curtis? Is she still out there? You're not getting one because you're obviously a fraternity of IWW people, I know you fraternized with those guys. You're never getting one of these, ever, ever, ever. The rest of you can have one if you embrace the right of the company to give you the right to apply for a job.
No.
Right. So I came to Butte. The working class and the employer class are in a class struggle that will never end until the workers are in control of everything. This is how it has to be. We, the IWW, advocate the overthrow of the capitalist system. We want the workers to be in charge of everything. I want an organization that will uplift those men and women who are in the gutter today here in Butte. We need to change the system from top to bottom. I was in Missoula back in '09, the first free speech fight. I stood there on the corner and I read the Constitution of the United States. 2 lines and I was arrested. 2 lines and I was thrown in jail on bread and water for 30 days. But when I was finally allowed out, they had free speech in Missoula. I went to Bisbee and Spokane. I went to Duluth where I was kidnapped and put in a cage for 3 days. But the striking dock workers broke me out of that jail, and we then walked through the striking streets of Duluth, proving that we weren't afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today either. I've been in Fresno with the fruit harvesters. My last assignment, Big Bill Haywood, president of my organization, the IWW, sent me to organize the mine workers of Arizona and Montana. I went to Bisbee in late 1916. I'm down there trying to organize everybody. They went on strike. What did they do? What did they do to us in Bisbee? They deported the miners. They deported 1,200 miners out to the deserts of Arizona. Put them in concentration camps with federal prisoners, is what they were. The only reason I didn't go is because I broke my ankle and I was laid up. But that allowed me to come to Butte. I came to Butte in the summer of 1917. You know what had happened, what was going on in Butte. We had a fire up at the Granite Mountain Mine on the 8th of June, 1917. You know how many people were killed there? 168 miners were killed underground that day. The worst hard rock mine disaster in U.S. history. Well, you went on strike. This is a good thing. You miners went on strike. But you know what? Butte, the Gibraltar of unionism, you're too unionized for your own good. Everybody has a union. You miners, of course, have a big union, but so do the electricians, so do the carpenters, so do the steel workers, so the newsboys even have a union. The company, that awful company, knows how to divide and conquer. We won't even talk to the miners. There's too many of you. We'll talk to the electricians. We'll do a little deal with the electricians, won't we? And you're going to go back to work because we sweeten the pot just a little bit. We'll talk to the carpenters, and then you're going to go back to work too. The miners, you're out in the cold. You got no money. You got no strike fund. You got no pay because you're on strike. But you're going to cave in, and that's what's happening this summer of 1917 until I got here. I came here to stir things up. That's what Bill Haywood wanted me to do. That's what I came to do. I gave speeches over there in the Finlander Hall on North Wyoming Street. Spent my nights next door in Mrs. Burns' boarding house. I gave some speeches down at the ball field and other places. Wherever they would listen to me, I gave these speeches. Well, you can speechify all you want, and you miners are having meetings and talk. That's all you do. You got to get off your butts. I had a committee of good Finnish women come to me. Finnish women with names like Altonen and Sauhinen. They came to me and said, what can we do? I said, get out there on the picket line. They're going to do more than you miners will do, meeting and meeting and meeting. You've got to stop meeting. Action is what we need to have. Action. You talk about all this and you approve resolutions. This is useless. This is not what you need to be doing. I'm giving the speeches that say things like, put the managers to work down in the hole in the ground. Make them earn a living for a change. And those men of muckstick. Get them off the 6th floor of the Hennessy building. Get them down in the mine and get calluses on their hands. Let them earn a living for a change instead of ordering us around. That's what you need to do. We need to make them earn that living. Well, we'll see if that happens, but don't hold your breath. Are there any prostitutes of the press here? hope they are. I hope they're here when I say that the capitalists of America, we're going to fight against you, not for you. We're not going to fight that war in France for you. We may fight it for us. The IWW opposes war across the board. We oppose it in all of its form. Thank you, Ms. Rankin, for supporting our view of that. But we will fight the Germans if it fights for us, the workers, against that capitalist system. We won't go die for the capitalists. We might die for ourselves. So on the night of the 31st of July of 1917, I was walking back to Mrs. Burns' boarding house where I was staying. I encountered Mike Sullivan. He was coming back from the saloon, and he told me that I better watch out because a lynching party was out there to get me. I just laughed. But at 3 o'clock that morning, on August 1st, a black Cadillac pulled up over there on North Wyoming Street, and 6 armed men, came out of that Cadillac and into Mrs. Burns' boarding house. They dragged me out in my night clothes. They tied me to the Cadillac and dragged me through the streets of Butte. My kneecaps practically wore off. And they took me to a railroad trestle down there on Silverbow Creek where I was hanged until I finally died. I thought it pretty good for being dead for 96 years, right? Well, the people of Butte may not have entirely agreed with the radicalism that I and the IWW was embracing. I'm sure a few of them didn't. But I hope that they knew that I was for the working man. I was for the working class. And because of that, my funeral remains the largest this town has ever seen. 12,000 of you Butte people lined the streets of Butte. 3,500 followed my casket down toward Mountain View Cemetery, where I am buried. You know, I was not supposed to be buried in Butte. Did you know that? I was supposed to be shipped back to Chicago or to Oklahoma or whatever. But my relatives told Bill Haywood, you do what you decide. And Bill Haywood sent a wire that said, bury Frank Little on the fighting ground. Yes. And that's why I'm still here in Butte. My tombstone down there reads, slain by capitalist interests for organizing and inspiring his fellow men. And I hope that's what I did. This is the sign they attached to my body. 3777, you know what that means, right? That's the vigilante symbol for justice or injustice, whatever you want to call it. This was attached to me. Others take notice. First and last warning. The L with the circle around it, that's me, Frank Little. These other letters, they may be different people that you imagine. D is almost certainly Big Bill Dunn. He was the editor of the Butte Strike Bulletin down there in that church on South Idaho Street. W over here is probably Burton K. Wheeler, one of our senators eventually here in Montana who led the fight for the individual rights of people and rights of man. I'm not sure who these other guys are. You might have different speculations about it. But, you know, with all that attention to my death, you would assume that a lot of people were arrested, right? 0 people were arrested. No one was arrested. Nobody knows except me who killed me. But I think we can put a reasonable speculation onto it that it was the Butte Police Department acting under orders from the Anaconda Company. That's how strong the Anaconda's control was in 1917. This continued right up until 1920. The culmination of this 6 years of amazing labor unrest that we had here in Butte in that time frame came to a screeching halt over there on the Anaconda Road, just a few blocks away from Mrs. Burns' boarding house in the Finlander Hall where I was abducted. And this happened in 1920. Another strike, an IWW strike, was in progress. This time the company sends their armed gunmen out of the Never Sweat mine. They start shooting into the crowd of unarmed miners. They wounded 15 of them, every one of them in the back, and they killed 2 of them. This is what you now know as the Anaconda Road Massacre, and it was the end of the labor movement in Butte. Why? They said, if they're going to kill us, what's our choice? You have no choice now. The company's control is absolute. And not just in Butte, and not just in the mines, but across the state of Montana. You know they own the legislature, and the Supreme Court, and most of Montana's newspapers until 1959. You know, if you control the press, what do you control? You control the way people think. That's what happened in the 1920s. And Montana actually became referred to as a corporate colony in the 1920s, a corporate colony of the Anaconda Company. That was the culmination. It wasn't the end. Things changed again after Franklin Roosevelt allowed some things to happen and the right to work laws came into effect in the 1930s. But the heart had been torn out of Butte, I think, by that 6 years of trying and fighting and fighting and fighting. That's what you need to keep doing here. You need to keep doing that forever and ever and ever if you want to make things happen. And even today, if you go over there on North Wyoming Street on a hot summer's night, you might listen really carefully. You might hear voices singing. Voices like mine that can't carry a tune. Voices that are accented, Finnish accents, Irish accents. And they're singing, "When the Union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. But what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? The Union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. The Union makes us strong." That was horrible. If you want to end war and strikes and stuff, you got to sing loud. One more chance. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. The Union makes us strong. Thank you. One big union.
Will be hard to top that. But you may remember our first presenter this year was the Chief Justice of the Montana Supreme Court, who addressed the issues of the Corrupt Practices Act, adopted in 1912, and what has happened since then, including the Citizens United decision of the U.S. Supreme Court, which gets us awfully close to that corporations are people and can spend anything they want to influence and control our public processes. I want to give a special recognition to Jim Murray here, one of our speakers, who was the most recent commissioner of political practices, who took the vested interests on as commissioner. Jim?
Yes,
So the battle Frank Little talked about may have changed along the edges, but the core of the battle is still here. Now, we're going to slide a little bit further back in time, and we're going to really actually have the debate of the century, the 19th century there. This debate involves a couple gentlemen who were arguing at that time over where the state capital of Montana ought to be. Now, it's an important thing to note, again, back to this party identification thing we've been learning a bit about, that both of these gentlemen, the two biggest Copper Kings, were both strong, leading members of the Democratic Party in Montana. And every governor in Montana, elected in the first 50 years of our history, was a Democrat, and I would say every one of them a supporter of the Anaconda Company and supported by the Anaconda Company. So, keep an eye on those party identifications as you hear things today. But we are privileged to hear this great debate because these gentlemen who started off as mining company allies and fellow Democratic Party leaders came a cropper, won election, and they began a feud. And that feud culminated and was being measured. Their success as to who was the strongest was going to be measured by where was the state capital. So we have, on one hand, arguing for Helena, William Andrews Clark, the owner of this opulent house, and arguing for Anaconda, the Irish immigrant, Marcus Daly. And we're going to hear from him right now, so all come on up.
Good afternoon. I'm Gary Schmidt, and it is my honor to welcome you to this great opportunity to hear two opposing views regarding the pending election of our permanent capital city. We have two distinguished citizens who wish to enlighten us all as to the qualities and attributes of their respective cities. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. William A. Clark, one of the very earliest pioneers of this state. And now join with me and welcome Mr. Marcus Daly, who upon his arrival as a representative of the Walker Brothers from Salt Lake City has become a true Montana pioneer and developer of Montana industries.
Yes, you will. I haven't given out these three, I am. Yes, you are. There you are. Mr. Clark, I found these misprints upstairs, and I thought I'd hand them out to the crowd as I went through. Would you pass that back, please? Would you pass that back, please?
Mr. MC,
This misprint
it appears
says,
that Mr. Daly
misprint
is starting
says, this misprint says, for $1, vote for your capital city, Anaconda.
Yeah.
There you
MC,
go.
Mr. Daly has started the auction, the debate a little early.
Good for $1. Did you get one there? Did you get one? Okay. And the last two, please. Now, Mrs. Daly couldn't make it, but she sent this fine Irish linen for my pocket to remind me of how nice it is here. I went to my optometrist before I came, and he gave me these glasses. And I... Oh. W.A., how are you?
Well, I was pretty good till you walked in the room.
Well, such is life, isn't it?
These fine citizens don't need your dollar handout card. Let's get to business. Isn't that what we're here for? The business of the state?
They were your misprints that I found upstairs.
Oh. I don't believe
I
it.
thought they needed to be handed out. You know, I was just going to explain to these folks how nice it'll be when Anaconda becomes the capital.
How nice Anaconda will be? When is Anaconda going to change?
Mr. Clark, you fail to see and appreciate the beauty of Anaconda.
One might be able to see the beauty of Anaconda if it were not for the heavy smoke from your smelter constantly covering the town, blasting all vegetation and constituting a perpetual menace to life and health.
The only thing that comes out of you, Mr. Clark, is the money that you've been spreading around to the bars in Montana, giving them to the bartenders, and telling them to bribe the voters to vote for Hannah.
Mr. Daly, that is a false accusation of your newspaper.
All I did, Mr. Clark, was print the truth about you from the lies you told about me in your scandal sheets.
Mr. Daly, I own a publication of truth, integrity, not a bunch of scandal sheets that float around like just happened now. You didn't even start your newspaper until Montana had achieved statehood.
Well, isn't it obvious that's when it was most needed?
Gentlemen, let us begin this debate in this prescribed manner. As we discussed earlier, Mr. Clark will begin. Mr. Clark.
Ladies and gentlemen, when all the citizens of this great state cast their ballot in a primary election of 7 cities and narrowed it down to 2, rest assured that there is just one city that is the best. Now, you have a choice of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity again to choose the best city for our everlasting capital. Now, the paramount issue before you in our new state is for you to establish Helena as the choice of our state government. Helena is truly the Queen City of the Rockies. Helena is the social, as well as the commercial, financial, meteorological, geographical, intellectual, educational, agricultural, musical, theatrical, and legal center of the state of Montana.
Mr. Clark, with all these qualities you're claiming for Helena, why must it also be the capital? Seems a bit greedy to me.
Because, folks, Anaconda has no wax floors, no art centers, no formal dresses, no skirts, no suits. I ask you, where are your 8-course dinners? Where are your 10-button gloves? And other social facilities. All of these qualities of refinement and even more, Anaconda is totally lacking in.
Well, of course it is. Anaconda is populated with honest, hard-working people who are representative of all Montana.
Mr. Daly, it is impossible to walk the streets of Anaconda without great congregations of women and their children and the workmen. When the streets are crowded, one cannot escape brushing up against the smelter soot-suited coveralls.
Brushing up against it is the closest an alien would ever get to work.
Every morning, you can see the lunch bucket brigade heading up the hill, being led by Mr. Daly in his $16 suit.
This suit did cost $16. But I have me tailor make a new one every week. Fine, go ahead.
My turn.
That's fine. Go ahead.
In Anaconda, the residents are addicted to large quantities of solid food. And the continuous, thick, nauseous fumes of corned beef and cabbage settles over the town like a pall.
Helena people would not know the difference of good food, being that their main diet is liquid.
In Anaconda, the whistle blows every morning at 7 a.m. This is an intolerable nuisance to refined people.
I've been in Helena at 7 a.m. It's a time when the merchant bankers and the ladies of the parlors put the socializing and stumble to their respective homes.
I've been in Anaconda and have witnessed the heavy ore trains ascending the hills and the trestles together with the steam stamp mill at your lower smelter works. Why, the pounding, it's causing the jarring of the earth for miles around. It is impossible. It is impossible to elevate a glass of fine wine to one's lip without having to hold both hands like a monkey.
Only another one then will know or care how a monkey drinks. We anacondas prefer the sturdy end of the monkey. We do our drinking, let the whiskey still in the glass, which speaks for the backbone of the people in both cases. And I've been having to think about all that pinky lifting failure that has been the scourge of Helena.
It's interesting to note that the refinement of copper in Anaconda attracts and produces such mysterious quantities of reckless, uncontrollable electrical thunderbolts. It's like a bolt out of the blue. No one should venture outdoors at any time of the day or night without incurring imminent risk of being maimed or killed by a reckless thunderbolt.
The last person struck by a careless thunderbolt, an anaconda, was from Helena. We anacondas look upon the happening as divine intervention. We anacondans wonder why the social elite of Helena gather to practice their hoity-toity way of life in a building called the Montana Club, which is not paid for. Anaconda's paid for.
Correct, Mr. Daly. Anaconda is paid for. However, the only reason that Anaconda is paid for is because, and your Montana motel is paid for, is because you enticed Ben Alley Hagen, William Randolph Hearst, Lloyd Tevis, through their humongous syndicate in San Francisco to pay for your pipe dream. I'll wager you that you even promised that when the time comes to choose a capital, you would ensure that Anaconda would be the state capital. It would not be your capital. It'd be, you try to make it the capital of Montana. All citizens of Montana expect Anaconda, except Anaconda, do not want the capital to become your capital.
It would not be my capital, Mr. Clark. It would be Montana's capital.
Mr. Daly, if Anaconda became the capital, you and your henchmen would strangle the fine citizens of this state. Allow me to ask you something about your town of Anaconda.
Go ahead.
Do you own the electric company?
Yes.
Do you own the water company?
Yes.
You own the railroad?
Yes, I do.
Do you own the only hotel in Anaconda?
Yes, I do. And the Montana Hotel makes the hotels in Helena look like the livery stable.
And with this kind of town monopoly, you still have the audacity to try to deceive the citizens of this state that you would not be in control of the capital and the legislature? You would ensure that the state legislators would have free room and board at your Montana hotel, courtesy of Mr. Daly. Why, the first legislative session, you would have a copper collar forged around the neck of every elected official. This state belongs to everyone, not one individual.
How can you say I would be in control when you've had your own well-paid lobbyists slithering up and down the halls of the territorial legislature?
Look who's talking. If it were not for you and your henchmen slithering up and down the halls of the territorial legislature, I would be in the halls of Congress right now. But you turned your back on this state's fine Democratic Party, supporting Thomas Carter, a Republican. He went to Congress, not I.
Worked, didn't it?
Citizens, hear me out. Mr. Daly claims that Anaconda is an industrial city, and that is very true. However, the capital belongs to a city with stability, a solid educational facility, and social graces. Helena has already established all of these qualities well beyond the town of Anaconda. If you vote for Anaconda, you will be putting Mr. Daly and his assistants in total control of the legislature and effectively controlling your life. So, come election day, cast your ballot for the only city and vote for Helena.
We'll see, Mr. Clark.
We will, Mr. Daly, we will
Gentlemen. I'm sure that the voters of the great state of Montana will vote their conscience, not for ideological differences or political prejudice or some other influence. I would like to thank you, Mr. Daly.
Yes,
For
sir.
this superb.
You betcha, you're I'm glad to meet you today,
Thank you.
and you did a fine job. Yes, sir. Goodbye, all, and thank you.
I would like to thank you, Mr. Clark, for your fine
It has
presentation.
been my pleasure to have you as an MC.
Thank you.
And I really would like you to take care of the near weakness.
And I'm sure that your citizens of Montana have enjoyed this superb debate today. And that you found the information presented will make it easier for you to vote your conscience. And as I am going to do, I have found this debate very beneficial. And now, the debate is finished. I'll get you a due, and I think I need to go to the bank. No. Clarkston. No. I think I'll just go to the M&M. I got enough to buy the whole house again.
Hey, let's bring all the Frank, Jeannette, Mr. Daly, Mr. Clark, everyone come on out here. Thank you all for coming and enjoying this little special semester-ending class. And there's more food, and there's a Christmas stroll. And thank you all for being such concerned citizens. Remember, Citizens United. Keep your eye on the ball.